us for tonight's Labor, Education, Workforce, and Youth Committee meeting. We are being broadcast live on HPA-TV and Channel 96 on Comcast and Frontier. And for future video reference, you can go to the YouTube channel. So thank you guys for joining us here today. Today we have present committee member Councilman James Sanchez. How are you? And we also have Council Member Shirley Surgeon. We have Attorney Alexandra Labardi. We also have Attorney Howard Rifkin. And we have our Human Resource Director, Mr. Thulani Legrier. Thank you for joining us.
Thulani!
So, yeah. All right. So, we'll call to order the meeting, and we're supposed to have some council members coming on, but in lieu of that, what I'll do is we have a resolution, and I want to read the resolution because there's been a couple proposals on the resolution, and the language is a little bit different from all of them. So I'll read the resolution that we're going over tonight. And so that is the resolution requesting that the Court of Common Council review the existing holiday schedule as is described in Chapter 2, Article 6, Division 7, Section 392 of the Hartford City Code with city labor contracts and other practices to determine whether and how to include Juneteenth as a holiday. So the whereas clause here, I should have read that in order. There has been community support and interest for including Juneteenth as an official holiday by the city of Hartford. And so I think with that being said, that's a good segue for Councilman Gale. Councilman Gale, welcome to tonight's meeting. I indicate, we spoke last week, and I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the resolution you put in.
So can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. This meeting started at 6, right?
Correct, sir.
Okay, you're just right on time. You're a good man.
I try.
Okay, so as you will recall, as everyone will recall, last year was quite a dramatic year, and among other things that occurred, there was a tremendous Black Lives Matter movement. Tremendous activity around recognizing and attempting to deal with some of the structural problems in our society going forward over time. And one of the things that this council did was to pass a resolution indicating that Juneteenth should be declared a city holiday. Now that was a resolution, so it did not have any real force and effect to actually make the day a holiday, a paid holiday, along with the other city paid holidays. But it certainly was an expression of intent, and it caused me and others to start thinking more seriously about institutionalizing Juneteenth as a city holiday. And giving recognition. And this is, we're going through somewhat of the same effort with respect to Columbus Day, where there's, we're kind of re-examining a lot of what we do and thinking about perhaps other ways to do it. So I went back to look at the city calendar and looked at the holidays in the city calendar, and it is an ordinance. Our holidays are set forth in an ordinance. There's 12 of them that are listed. They are not, by the way, the federal holidays. Federally, Lincoln's birthday, for instance, is not a federal holiday, nor is Good Friday. But both of those are city holidays. So the city has 12. I think the federal government has 10. I think the two I mentioned may be the two that are not federal holidays. And I also looked around and I noticed that some of these holidays are state holidays, but not all towns follow state holidays either. For instance, I checked with New Haven. New Haven does not have Lincoln's birthday as a holiday in the city of New Haven, even though Lincoln's birthday is a state holiday. But it is not a holiday within the city of New Haven. And I know, for instance, in our school system a couple of years ago, the school system decided that Veterans Day was not going to be a holiday anymore, and they adjusted their calendar, and there was actually quite an uproar from our veteran community, among others, saying that this was somewhat disrespectful. And now I believe that Veterans Day is back as a school holiday. In any event, looking at our 12 holidays, it occurred to me that, and again, a little historical perspective, back in the late 1960s, I think, or early 1970s, the federal government did recognize two holidays in February: Lincoln's birthday, February 12th, and Washington's birthday, February 22nd. Those were each federal holidays. And at some point, and I'm not sure if it was late 60s or early 70s, but sometime 69 to 72, I think, those two holidays were combined into President's Day. And so hence, we now have President's Day, which was this week, Monday. But we also, in Connecticut, we continued to celebrate Lincoln's birthday. And in thinking about Juneteenth and what it symbolizes, and in thinking about Lincoln's birthday and what it symbolizes, it struck me that both holidays symbolize very much the same thing. I think that to a great extent, we honor Abe Lincoln's birthday because we consider Lincoln to have done a great deed in freeing the slaves in 1863, whenever the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, and you know, the whole Civil War, et cetera. But it does strike me that that's why we honor Lincoln. And so if indeed it would be more appropriate in today, in 2021, for the recognition of the abolishment of slavery to be Juneteenth and not Lincoln's birthday, I wanted to set that up. I wanted to tee that up so we could have a discussion as to what would be the more appropriate holiday. And really, I'm probably not a great spokesperson for this. This is, and so I did reach out to several folks, actually, in the several pastors in North Hartford, Pastor A.J. Johnson and Pastor Trevor Buford, and asked for some feedback. I asked for feedback from lots of people. I didn't get it from lots of people, but from those that I got feedback from, everybody was fairly universal in saying they would rather celebrate Juneteenth than Lincoln's birthday. And so that gave me the impetus then to say, fine, let's put it out there. Let's put the ordinance out, and let's indicate that henceforth in the city of Hartford, Juneteenth is going to be a paid city holiday, but Lincoln's birthday will not be a paid city holiday. Now, I recognize, and I think maybe we'll hear from administration. I didn't get too deep into it as to how this would affect existing union contracts. And I'm sure that there is an effect on existing union contracts. And I would imagine that there would have to be some approval process. Not every employee in the city is a union employee, as we know. And I know that we attempt to provide our non-union employees with pretty much the same benefits as our union employees. But I don't know that that's written anywhere. It might be prudent to have the same holiday schedule all around, but I suspect that there is some ability to change. I believe our holiday schedule has changed over time, and so I suspect that it could change again. It would just be a function of trying to figure out what the process is for change, and maybe it would be a migratory process where it would take some time for it to be fully fully effective across all union contracts. Anyway, I've probably spoken too much about this already, but there's the background of why this is in front of you today.
Thank you, Councilman Gale. I'd like to introduce Councilman Sanchez. I'll get to your questions, but I'd like to introduce a couple people who have joined us. We have Majority Leader T.J. Clark, and our new inaugural, I don't know what's, I'm tongue twisted today, Director of the Office of Equity and Opportunity, Ms. Karen Taylor with us. So thank you for joining us today. So with that being said, Councilman Gale, thank you for bringing this back on our radar. Councilman Sanchez, you had a question?
Yes, I appreciate the explanation and the reasoning behind it, Councilman Gale. I would like to hear from Majority Leader Clark on his take, because if I recall right, I think back in 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, Majority Leader, but you also put in a resolution for Juneteenth, correct? I'd like to hear your take.
Yes, I was just, so I had spoken, Councilman Sanchez, thank you for that, because you were thinking alike. So I had invited Councilman Majority Leader Clark to come in because in June, I believe he proposed a resolution similar to this. And Councilman Gale, thank you for bringing it to the forefront. Again, I think it's important to continue to have these conversations, leaving them at the front burner to make sure that we're pushing the envelope in that direction, one thing. And then number two, providing transparency to the community. And so Majority Leader Clark, the floor is yours in terms of your resolution and whatever, your motive, whatever you would like to say, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you for inviting me to speak, and good evening to everyone. So this is a conversation that first started last year. I believe it was in last year in June when I introduced the resolution that the council passed for the city of Hartford to adopt Juneteenth as a paid city holiday. And we were gracious enough, I believe, for unanimous consent for this resolution. But with that said, it was already indicated that this is something that would have to been done. Even though the resolution was passed, the administration would have to work with the unions through the collective bargaining process in order for this holiday to be officially adopted. And I know speaking with Councilman Gale before regarding the ordinance and whether or not one holiday should be taken out and placed with Juneteenth, as he was talking about. I have no problem with keeping Lincoln's birthday in February. Because that does give some type of symbolism about the abolishment of slavery. That's actually one of the reasons why Black History Month was designated in February, because it dealt with not just Lincoln's birthday, but also too the birthday of Frederick Douglass. So I have no problems with the fact of Juneteenth is discussed through the collective bargaining process with the unions and adopted as an additional paid city holiday, which makes it, I think it makes it 13. I don't think an additional day would take away any huge revenues that the city would be able to collect, because we have transitioned to an electronic form system with our development services team, with permits, as well as with the city's tax collector's office, where people can really, the push has been to pay taxes online, which we have seen since the COVID pandemic era. So I think this is important, and I think the city would be one of the first in the state, actually would beat the state of Connecticut to adopt Juneteenth as a paid city holiday. And there were conversations about other holidays to take away, and I know that the U.S. government's paid city holidays differ from Connecticut's paid city holidays, but I think this is something that, we could be trend setting and also to let our community know, and especially those that have been disenfranchised very often and through the years, that, we recognize and we value your time, your energy, your effort, and most importantly, your contribution that you made to the American society, because we're recognizing many of the people who actually helped to build this country to where it is now. And this is something that we need to really recognize them with. It's just one day. And, I would hope that, the unions would agree to and agree to this. I'm happy to have this conversation with my colleagues as well.
Thank you, Majority Leader. So with that being said, we do have a list of folks who are going to be speaking today. And then what I'll do is at the end, after everyone gets an opportunity to speak, we'll ask the questions, because I would imagine there are probably questions bubbling up as we're all speaking. So with that being said, I want to tee it up for, we heard about the union negotiations, the union involvement, that process. So I want to tee it up for Corporation Counsel. And we have Attorney Rifkin here and Attorney Lombardi here. I don't know who wants to speak on, the process, I guess if you will.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll start, and then Alex can correct me when I misspeak. So just so everybody knows, and this is not about the policy issue or the question of whether or not to add Juneteenth as a recognized holiday, but to give you some background and understand how that fits into the context of now celebrating Lincoln's birthday. So over a number of years, and I think of all the collective bargaining agreements, I think most of them, as I understand it, actually have a provision that allows the city, most but not all, has a provision that allows the city to consolidate Lincoln's birthday and Washington's birthday and celebrate it as President's Day. And that the city would be able to do that without having to do further negotiations. So it seems to me, a process issue, both in terms of whether, and the ordinance that was proposed before the council would have eliminated Lincoln's birthday and added Juneteenth as another day for a holiday. So in that context, there has already been a process over the years to get each of the collective bargaining agreements in such a way as the city could move to consolidate Lincoln and Washington's birthday. So that's one issue. Second is, but that has not occurred with all the bargaining units. And Alex, you might know how many are outstanding. I think it's 2 or
4. 4.
Okay. So 4, we have the authority to consolidate.
No, I think, the opposite. 4, we would still need to negotiate.
Okay. So, I mean, that would not necessarily be prevented from going to the unions, all of the unions, and saying, well, let's just add Juneteenth as a holiday. We could certainly do that. But because the issue itself, its holiday schedule, is subject to collective bargaining, it's our view that that would have to be a conversation that would take place between the city and the collective bargaining units that represent our employees. On the question of the ordinance that exists, if we were to add through negotiations June 16th, then it's our view that the ordinance should be amended to reflect that change as it pertains to non-bargaining unit employees so that there will be consistency. I don't think it would be a very good idea, and Tulani could speak to this better than I can, but I don't think it would be a good idea to have a difference in the holiday schedule between bargaining unit and non-bargaining unit employees, just in terms of supervision and the like for the city. So there's a process. I think it would be one that would have to take place over a period of time. It's hard to imagine that employees would refuse another holiday, but we do feel like, and Alex can speak to this further, that it would require a conversation with each of the unions.
Great. So I'll just add, yes, and certainly to Howard's point, would probably be easier to offer them an additional holiday than to change a holiday. So we'd have to consider that. Also, two of the units who don't currently have language about consolidation of President's Day are our two biggest public safety units, police and fire, who, as you know, are 24/7, 365 operations. They work on holidays and they're entitled to certain premium pay or banked holidays when that occurs. So there would be a budgetary impact there. It's not just paying someone when you would have paid them anyways to be at work, because they will be working and they'll get some additional consideration for that. So it's not necessarily a budget neutral proposal. I am thankfully not the budget person, the numbers person. So you'd have to ask OMBG to run an analysis on that. With the exception of a couple of bargaining units, we're not in current negotiations, so this would be considered midterm bargaining. It's something we would propose to the unions, and they can certainly engage in a discussion with us if they want to, but if they want to say, hey, we don't want to talk about holidays right now, they're not obligated to come to the table because their contracts aren't necessarily open for negotiation right now. So, this is all speculation without actually sitting down with them and asking to have the conversation, starting the conversation. I don't have a crystal ball to know which way it would go, but I did just want to throw out the budget impact, especially as relates to the public safety units.
Thank you, Alex. So, Councilman Gale, is it okay that, because I want to make sure that everyone has a piece and then we save our questions at the end, because in terms of, or do you feel like it's particular to an item, and it's up to you. How do you feel? Whatever you want to do. I just want everyone, because I just feel a lot of people are going to get their questions answered as we go down the line, but it's up to, hold on, let me unmute you. Oh, you got to unmute yourself, Councilman.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to ask the following.
Sure.
Hearing what's been said about the union contracts, the question I have is, if the city by ordinance said these are the city holidays, understanding that they would not be effective on an existing union contract, when that contract came up for renegotiation, so when each contract comes to an end, you have to renegotiate it. When it came up for renegotiation, if the city had already changed the ordinance, is it not the case that the union at that point could not bargain? They would have to accept these as the city holidays?
I'll let Alex take the first whack at that.
Sure. So, Councilman Gale, if it has an impact on a term or condition of employment that requires bargaining under state law, the Municipal Employees Relations Act, then we would still be required to bargain it. The fact that we change the ordinance doesn't automatically carry over to the union. If we tried to implement it unilaterally, saying, we changed an ordinance and now you don't have Lincoln's birthday off, you have Juneteenth off instead, they could bring a labor board violation for that.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I get that. I'm not suggesting. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that when you sit down to do the next bargaining, and by the way, the proposed ordinance before you does not add a holiday. I hear Councilman Clark suggesting that perhaps we add one. That's not what this ordinance suggested. This ordinance suggested staying with 12. And so my real question is, if the city wants 12 holidays and we say we want these 12, does the union actually have the power in bargaining to say, no, we don't want those 12, we want some other 12? You understand my question?
Well, if we, I think,
I think so. You skipped for 1 second there.
Oh, okay. Well, what I'm asking, if the city says these are the 12 holidays we want, and it's time for a new union contract, does the union have the power to say, no, we don't want those 12 holidays? Like, you know, could the union say, we don't want Thanksgiving as a holiday? We don't want July 4th as a holiday. We want 12 holidays, but we want to decide which 12 they are.
They too can put a proposal on the table, for instance, that says we want 12 floating holidays. I'm just making this up. Or I don't want July 4th. I want, you know, the day after the Super Bowl. I'm just making things up.
All right, one follow-up question. Based on what you're telling me, it sounds like we could, as the city of Hartford, end up with police department having 12 holidays that are totally different from a fire department that would have 12 holidays that are totally different from a DPW. That you're saying we could have terrible inconsistency, union contract to union contract, because they would all have the right to bargain for whatever holidays they want.
In theory, yes, but remember, bargaining is a two-way street. So they can make a proposal like that. We can say that's an administrative nightmare. We can't have different bargaining units working different schedules. It's impossible for us to supervise that way. And we would reject the proposal. If we come to an impasse, then that gets decided at arbitration, where we would make our case. Arbitrators, this is why this is untenable. And so you know, I would feel pretty confident in making a case for these holidays are the holidays citywide, and this is why they need to remain the same. And then ultimately we would get an award. So it's possible. It's not likely.
All right, good. Well, that answers the question.
So I think the important point, Councilman Gale, is that notwithstanding the existence of current ordinance that lists the paid holidays, that it is a possible subject of union negotiations.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
All right. So with that being said, why don't we move on to Mr. Thulani Legrier, Director Thulani. The floor is yours.
Sure. And I think between Howard and Alexandra, they covered a majority of the relevant things. I do want to address Howard's comment around keeping and maintaining parity between non-union and union. You know, so there are, you know, real kind of perception-based elements there that I would say, you know, to the extent that we can continue to make sure that people understand that, you know, the city seeks to maintain equitability and fairness all around, you know, that's a positive. And so if you had a disjoint, you know, that perception could be adversely impacted. Additionally, the logistics, you know, many of the folks who are non-union tend to be in more senior leadership roles. So you could have a circumstance in which, you know, some of the folks who actually are responsible for supervising the work and the employees who do it would be on vacation, while, you know, the folks who are actually doing the work are on their normal work schedule. And so that would obviously not really be the ideal arrangement. And to the points that were made, I think, you know, it's fairly clear also from the HR standpoint that this would be something that we would have to bargain with each of the respective unions, but that can be done over time, or it can be done, you know, mid-cycle, as Alexandra mentioned. Fortunately, we are in active negotiations with a handful of the bargaining units we support at this point. So that is still something that's within the realm of possibilities.
So Director Legrier, just for the record for folks, what if we could just, I think we all kind of assume what the 12 holidays are, but
Sure.
Can you just provide us just like chronologically, what are the 12 holidays?
Yeah, so I'll do them in order of the fiscal year as far as the sequence is concerned. So the first holiday is the 4th of July. And now in this case, in this most recent fiscal year of FY21, this was the only one where there was a difference in the actual observation of that holiday date in terms of sworn versus non-sworn employees, because the 4th of July fell on a Saturday. So our rules stipulate that a holiday that falls on a Saturday would be observed for folks on a regular schedule, non-sworn folks, on that preceding Friday. If the holiday falls on a Sunday, then it's the following Monday. For sworn individuals, that holiday is actually observed on that date. And as Alexandra mentioned, they either get premium pay or they can bank those holiday days. So that's just a call out for that first one for this year. And in some other years, that obviously could vary based on the dates upon which these holidays fall. So next after Independence Day or the 4th of July would be Labor Day. Obviously, that's observed in September. The following holiday is Columbus Day, which I think we've heard varying kind of potential around that holiday evolving to some other kind of nomenclature. Thereafter, we observe Veterans Day in November, Thanksgiving Day in November as well. And in many cases, recently, you might recall that the mayor has been generous enough to actually extend an extra day off the day after Thanksgiving. And that is an instance where we also, although it's a favorable impact, we do have to bargain with the unions in order for that to be so. Thereafter, we go into December, and that would be Christmas observed on the Christmas Day, New Year's Day in January. Thereafter, Martin Luther King Jr. Day in January as well. And then as has been recently mentioned, both Lincoln's birthday and Washington's birthday are observed in February, and we just came off of those holidays, and they gave us a nice little 4-day weekend. And then Good Friday is observed in April, and lastly, Memorial Day in May.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like because of the Friday after Thanksgiving, there's already kind of 13 holidays, quote unquote, unofficially or officially in the books.
Unofficially, yes, sir. So I think, we run the risk of that being the implicit expectation now that we've done it a couple of years in a row. So I think that it would probably be perceived in a way that may not be entirely favorable if, all of a sudden, this calendar year, the mayor decided not to give that, extra day, whereas the prior 2 years, it's been something that we've given out as an additional benefit and, morale boost and recognizing all the hard work and so forth.
Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we have Ms. Director Taylor. I know it's your first meeting. I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't know if you were prepared to speak at all, but since you're here and you're new and everyone's excited to have you on board, I want to provide you with the opportunity, the floor, if you want to suggest or add anything.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, and good evening to those of you I haven't had an opportunity to meet one-on-one as of yet. I think that this is an awesome resolution to be putting forward in this time to acknowledge the enslaved African Americans who built this country. However, wondering what it would mean if we were to either combine the Lincoln-Washington holiday to be able to create this additional holiday in June. What that would mean for employees around their sort of expectation of that 4 days consecutively to have off in the month of February. And I don't know if that's historically what happens, because this is my first year having that sort of 4-day thing. And people were like, yeah, like, this is awesome. Like, we get this long weekend, and the purpose of adding this holiday is really to have the space for an acknowledgement, right? To be able to convene people, to bring people around an idea that is, in fact, not just morale boosting, right? But also to acknowledge the work that's been put in by marginalized folks in this country. And so I wonder what would happen if we didn't add the holiday, but we then sort of combined the two in February, like what that would mean for folks and whether or not people would be able to embrace the idea as much, considering that this is something that is not typical. I don't think many cities, many places officially acknowledge Juneteenth as a holiday. It's a thing that has been trending, and for good reason, as I said, to acknowledge the contribution of enslaved African Americans. But I think that the way that we do this is going to be really important for it to not seem gimmicky, and also for it to not come off in some ways as an inconvenience, or we're taking away from people in other areas where they feel as though, they're excited about or looking forward to having a carved out holiday around Lincoln and Washington's birthday as well. So those are just my initial thoughts, unprepared, unprompted.
Well, thank you for your thoughts and thank you for, providing the opportunity. Just curious, and it's just my own, since it is an inaugural office position, are these the type of items that you see yourself being involved in the future? Yes.
Absolutely. And so like selfishly, as this is coming forward, I'm like, yeah, like this is, this is an awesome time to be able to put this forward. But definitely as we're sort of creating these inaugural practices, in addition to building out this office, we're going to be really conscious as to how we do it so that we are inspiring people and not alienating them.
Yeah, and so thank you for saying that, because I think the important part is, and having this conversation. I'm glad everyone brings it to came to the committee, because I think the important part is when you speak to community members, as we all have, and council members alike. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're talking to community members, and they're like, just change the holiday, right? Like it's that simple. But I think it's important to have these conversations to talk about something that's so important and so impactful, like a change of Juneteenth and the recognition that it means, and the opportunity that we have as a city to really be a leader around this. But at the same token, there are practices and policies that we have to adhere to. And I think it's just, that's why I think it's important to have the conversation. So with that being said, I want to open up the floor and have a kind of not as formal as possible in terms of, if there are any questions. I think everyone had the opportunity to speak. We have two counselors who put the resolutions through. We have Corporation Counsel. We have HR here. We have the Office of Equity and Opportunity. So I want to open the floor to colleagues or offices with each other to, ask any questions. So I have some questions. So if y'all don't ask questions, I'm gonna ask them. So it's, Councilman Sanchez, you asked earlier, so I'll go with Councilwoman Surgeon first. Ladies first.
Mute myself. Thank you all, and thank you to inviting me to your committee meeting. Through you, Mr. Chair. So if I'm going to understand this, so it'll be over a period of time if this conversation gets started. I think the resolution that was put in last year hopefully had the administration start the conversation with the unions. So through you, Alex or Howard, would this be over a period of time with the conversation with the different unions if this was something they would buy into? Either for a change of, in February or an additional holiday pursuant to the fiscal numbers if you add additional holiday?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, as we said before, we could do mid-bargaining with the various unions that have closed contracts if we were to add an additional holiday. We would also have to do the same thing if a decision was taken to eliminate Lincoln's birthday and add the new holiday, so Juneteenth. So, but to answer your question directly, it's my understanding there have been no conversations between the administration and any of the bargaining units about this idea today.
Through you again, Mr. Chair. So as a follow-up, if you open a mid-bargaining conversation, is it just one item on the table, or would that mean other items may be put on the table?
We wouldn't be reopening the contracts. So there wouldn't be a process, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong. We would go to the union leadership and say, we would like to have a conversation with you about whatever we're going to do, adding Juneteenth, taking away Lincoln's, or just adding Juneteenth as a new holiday.
Right, which doesn't prevent the union from coming back and saying, okay, you want to do that. Well, we might be okay with that if you also do this. That's what bargaining is. It's not always limited to what we want to talk about once we open the door. And if there can't be a meeting of the minds, then at the end of the process, we walk away with status quo. But
Yeah. So then, therefore, I'm not sure when all the different union contracts expires.
all
So
different times.
they're all different time over different years. And
Right.
so maybe by the time all the union contracts expires, the administration may change. And so this conversation may not continue. That could be a possibility.
Well, as we said before, this does not necessarily mean that we would wait until new negotiations started.
Okay.
We could, as Attorney Lombardi just said, go to all the collective bargaining units and say, we'd like to have a conversation about adding Juneteenth as a holiday. Now, as Alex said, that would not prevent a union from saying, well, we want to talk about 5 other issues if we're going to talk about that. But there's nothing in that would force us to renegotiate aspects of the contract.
Okay. So we have no June. There's no holidays in June. From the list Mr. Talani has listed. So
Father's Day, though.
I'm sorry?
Father's Day.
It's not a legal holiday. Jeez. God. All right, fine. Father's Day. All right, so we're going to put Father's Day on the table too, and as Mother's Day gets on the table, I'm good. So would we need like a fiscal analysis if you were to add an additional holiday to negotiation?
So remember that the mayor is ultimately the person under state law who is the chief negotiator for the city. And I'm sure he would, I don't want to speak for him, but I'm sure he would insist on a fiscal analysis about the adding of a holiday, given the impacts that we discussed earlier on some of our employees. I think there would probably be less of an impact, probably none, but again, I'm not the numbers person, if we are getting rid of a holiday in February and just adding it onto June, because it's net neutral as far as the number of holidays. But yeah, I think we would need, if the proposal is just to add an additional holiday, we would need a fiscal analysis.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez, Councilman Sanchez.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate what Director Taylor and Legriera had mentioned, and I definitely agree with what Attorney Lombardi had mentioned about the bargaining piece. And my and as you know, I absolutely support the Juneteenth, but the issue here, I think, is that, and to Director Taylor's point, is that will our employees willing to give up a 4-day weekend, which in the military we call a 96, right? 96 hours off. And then now to Director Legriera's point that this year, the mayor afforded the employees to have the day after Thanksgiving off, which is another 4-day weekend. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to continue, but now we're looking at possibly losing, if we're going to try and negotiate this, we may be losing either that 4-day weekend of Thanksgiving, which I truly support, and or lose a 4-day weekend that just passed, which I'm sure the majority of the employees look forward to. Now, if we were to negotiate something to that effect, then to Attorney Lombardi's point, they will come back. And I'm a union guy, so so I've been a union steward. I've been on the executive board as well, and that's the important piece. They may come back and try and to renegotiate further, not just the day of Juneteenth off, but something else added to it. So that is. I think is going not difficult, but it's definitely maybe a little challenging. To here we are trying to give our employee that most important day off to recognize, right, this enslaved population. But, you know, are they willing to give up a 4-day weekend? So, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So,
Yeah, so I think Majority Leader, you were next, and then after Director Taylor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So just that I'm clear, and I'm glad that we're having this dialogue. If it would be the will of the mayor to proceed to approach the bargaining units, and Attorney Lombardi, I'm not sure if you actually said which of those, I think it's 4, that we can approach midway.
We can approach any bargaining unit midterm. There's 4 who don't currently have language in their contract that allows us to consolidate the 2 presidents' birthdays into one holiday, President's Day. So those are the 4 that we would have to approach if we're looking to get rid of Lincoln's birthday.
Gotcha.
And we would have to go to everyone to add a holiday, just so that's clear.
Gotcha. So, and I can understand the fiscal analysis because there will be a fiscal impact. So you mentioned the public safety union. So obviously that's police and fire. Would that also include public works, even though okay. Which will be the heaviest impacted as well, because that's another one that's 24/7 basically.
Right. So we have our 911 dispatchers in that unit. And then there would also be an impact to public service. Remember, when we're talking about things like sanitation, for instance, there would be a delay in pickup on a different day of the year. So yes, there would be impacts in that bargaining unit as well.
Okay. So I'm assuming this question, I think it could be geared towards Howard, that for the fiscal analysis to be done, it could either, what would be the most appropriate way to further this conversation? Would it be preferably by way of council resolution, or just a simple request of to the CFO via the mayor or the COO?
Yeah, I mean, I think, through you, Mr. Chair, I think the best approach would be to have a conversation with Jen and ask her to do an analysis of what the impact would be, and you might want to play out a couple of scenarios. One is, what if we eliminated Lincoln's birthday and added Juneteenth? The other scenario would be just leaving the 2 presidents' holidays and adding Juneteenth, and do some analysis of what the impact would be, or any other combination thereof.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would join you in drafting an email to Ms. Hakano.
Thank you. I put that as a follow-up item. Thank you, Majority Leader. Director Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So maybe one more additional point of consideration for analysis. Maybe we would swap out Columbus Day, already evolving into Indigenous Peoples Day, right? And be able to implement Juneteenth, right? That would be like, you get a twofer in that one, right? You get rid of a holiday that is already sort of evolving out of at Hartford Public Schools, we don't observe Columbus Day either. It is usually a professional development day, so it's not an official holiday. So in that way, there wouldn't be necessarily the fiscal impact. We could be sort of in alignment with our values in terms of being on par with the way that history is moving, and still be able to get the Juneteenth holiday in June. And people would probably rather have a holiday off in June than in October, maybe. So that's another idea just to throw out there.
The Director of Office and Equity coming through with the intent. I like it. Obviously, I had that as one of my items of the Director LeGrier.
Myself off of mute. Yeah, so I think this question might be more appropriate also for Director Taylor. I guess the question is, is there a point at which we run the risk of alienating others if we don't continue to recognize the contributions of others, because obviously Juneteenth, has a significance, but there's also International Women's Day in March, and there are other holidays of cultural significance that recognize the contributions that those groups have made to this country. And so at what point do we, have to take that into account as well?
Director LeGrier, when we have the answer to that question, I will no longer be employed, right? So like how far do we evolve with the ways in which the world is sort of moving? And I was thinking about this as you were saying that we also get Good Friday off, and you're thinking about specifically like Christian religious holidays, right? And so I think that we can start here because the moment is sort of ripe with opportunity for that. We have a lot of organizations even within our city who are evolving in this direction. I think the Hartford also just officially made Juneteenth a holiday. And so point well taken. And it is, people have different sort of schools of thought on that, myself included, in terms of what we're acknowledging and what we aren't. I know that at my previous employer, we also gave folks a floating holiday so that they could utilize it as they wish, whether it was, for Ramadan or for other sort of like religious celebrations that were not included. We also gave a day of reflection related to like social unrest because of the things that folks were going through this past summer around protests and illness. So there are a few ways that we can do it, but I think that in collaboration with Human Resources and the Office of Equity and Opportunity, we can figure out a way to articulate our shared values within our human resource benefits. So happy to continue the conversation, Director LeGrier.
So that's a great question, Director, if I may, because I just, I appreciate all this fruitful conversation, and maybe it's a conversation with Corporation Counsel, but also with the administration, right? Does it behoove us to ask the question of what people would like in terms of the staffing? Because I think, or am I wrong in the fact when there may be some assumptions that we're assuming that folks may not want the 96 like Councilman Sanchez does, or maybe they see the appeal of and the importance of Juneteenth and willing to sacrifice a 96, or maybe it's not, or maybe they want Columbus. And so when we go into negotiations, I feel it's important to understand what maybe the other side would want. And so does that happen? Is it a survey that goes out? Like how can we, because we don't want to be negotiating for something that the majority of people are not feeling. Does that make sense? I don't know if it's a Corp Counsel question. I don't know if it's a Director, HR question, Office of Equity. I don't know. Somebody help me out here.
It's not a legal question. It's really policy choices. And I think the guidance of Tulani in terms of not having so many disparate holidays that you have concerns about supervision that may have gaps in it. So I think you have to be thoughtful and careful about how you approach this, but that's not a legal opinion.
Okay, so I mean, so there's the fiscal impact, right? I mean, obviously that I think Majority Leader was discussing, but I mean, does it make sense, Director Taylor, like, or Director LeGrier, like, does it make sense to like somehow get some kind of a pulse?
I can see the pros and cons of that. I mean, I think it's always great when you start with data and you have insights that are specific to the audience that you're looking to cater to. In this case, city employees. At the same time, to Karen's point earlier, if we have a perspective on our values and why we're making these sorts of changes, then that would be kind of what we would potentially start with in the context of communicating our why, so that people understand, the sorts of things that we're looking to do, as opposed to kind of starting with, well, what would they prefer, not necessarily knowing kind of where they're at presently and why they might select one option over another. Karen, I don't know if you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I just want to read the resolve again, and Majority Leader, I'm not sure, I don't have your pardon me, because I don't have your resolution up, but I want to read the resolve.
I'll send it to you. I'll get it to you.
Okay, but and then I'll read it once I get it, and because I think it's important to read the resolve and what we're trying to do here. And I think Councilman Gale's resolve says, you know, it says the Court of Common Council review the existing holiday schedule, which is what we're doing now. Section da 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 da, you know, all that legal stuff. That's important legal stuff. I'm not minimizing. And of the Hartford City Code with city labor contracts and other practices to determine whether and how to include Juneteenth as a holiday. So I think that that's kind of what we're doing here. And Majority Leader, you're sending me that, right?
Yes.
And so I think that that's kind of the way that we're kind of trying to resolve, like what will be the best, how do we make this path happen? But Councilwoman Surgeon, I saw you with your hand up.
Yes, Mrs. Chair, because I think Attorney Lombardi said eloquently that the mayor is the chief administrator who does all the bargaining with the unions. And so regardless, we can pass, wonderful resolution, ordinance, it's up to the mayor to actually, does he want to take up this issue? That's number one, which you need to ask. And then, for me, getting back to us and saying, these are the options if I choose to take up, this concept. So we can sit here and discuss all the possibilities, but if we don't go to the mayor, and find out where his definite mindset is, I think we're actually kind of spinning our wheels.
Yeah, I agree. We could be here forever. Councilman Gale, I want to recognize you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to pick up on your question about how do holidays, I mean, I think in essence you're saying, how do holidays come into existence? When you're asking the question as to what extent we should have data or, how do we take a pulse of the community? And reflecting back on that list of the 12 holidays that do exist, it's pretty clear to me that none of them, I would guess, came into existence because of any data or because of any survey. They all came into existence, not all, but many of them came into existence because there was a public feeling, a public movement. So Memorial Day, if I'm not mistaken, came into existence post-Civil War after the country had lost 600,000 lives in the Civil War. There was a tremendous feeling that there had to be some memory preserved over this tremendous loss of life. And Veterans Day, same thing, was after World War I. November 11th was the day of the armistice in World War I. And there was a feeling in the country that, my God, all these people had died all around the world and sacrificed, and this was the Great War. Who knew? Anyway, I think that here, at least last summer, there was a tremendous amount of public sentiment throughout the entire country. There were demonstrations, there were movements, there were on a daily basis for quite some time, not seen for quite some time in this country, so I take that as symptomatic of the community saying this is something. This is something not necessarily. I mean, those things weren't around Juneteenth, obviously, but they were around some recognition. Affecting Black lives. So that's kind of how I would look at it in terms of trying to decide whether I think we're the policymakers, and so I suppose if we kind of move down this road and we got a lot of negative feedback, okay, well, maybe the public doesn't really think this is such a great idea. I do think, though, that based on what I've heard, it makes a lot of sense to sort of continue this matter in committee, if you will, and ask for a budgetary analysis as to at least the two the two questions that were posed. What would be the cost if we eliminated Lincoln's birthday? And there's certainly some degree of logic in replacing Juneteenth with Lincoln's, because as I said at the very beginning, it seems to me they're both very much celebrating the same thing, and so I'm not clear that our citizens or our residents or the country would feel the necessity to have 2 days celebrating the same thing. Not that would be, maybe it's very appropriate, but it certainly felt like switching one out for the other was not removing anything for anybody, but just giving more recognition in a different way. But anyway, those are my comments.
So, Councilman Gale, I think you made a couple great points in that when holidays were selected, it was part of public movements, and I absolutely agree with you in that, we had a public movement, a national movement, a national moment that recognized the importance of Juneteenth, right? And so I don't think anyone is disagreeing with that piece there. But I also think with movements, it's also an important time to look at processes and practices that take place that happened before with movements that maybe we can rectify now. And so when we talk about practices and policies, yes, there's a public sentiment on that, but on the other end, there is also a handful of holidays, 12, 13, 14, whichever one you acknowledge it. So, the past practice has been a public movement. We come over the top, we instill it, and then see what happens. So instead of doing that, maybe we look at the implementation and the assimilation process. And if it's part of the collective bargaining units, I think that's a new term that I learned today. Like, why not implement it and make sure that as we bring this holiday in, that it's welcomed and receptive? And, so I don't think it's about the Juneteenth. I think everyone would agree with that. But, who's to say that, Columbus Day isn't the right one? Maybe the sentiment is that folks don't want Columbus Day. We don't know that unless we ask the question. That's just my opinion. So with that being said, I want to read Majority Leader Councilman Sanchez.
So, I'm kind of stuck here because I'd like to send this to council with a favorable recommendation, but at the same time, I think it's important that if it's sent favorably, it still is pending on research and polling and the conversation with the union leadership as well as the employees of the city. So so I'm going to refer to Attorney Rifkin. What would be excuse the background noise? What would be your suggestion as far as because I support this, but again, we still need more information.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that my recommendation would be to get the information, particularly on the fiscal impact, and then have another conversation. And quite frankly, the resolution really, the way it was adopted at the last council meeting, it really asks this committee to have a conversation about the possibility of having Juneteenth recognized as a city holiday. If this committee wanted to go forward with that, it would seem that the appropriate action really would be to introduce a resolution calling on the mayor to do X, Y, and Z, including opening conversations with the various unions. And I I would think that the best practice here would be for the committee chair or whomever should have a pre-meeting conversation with the mayor and just sort of play this by him while you're gathering the information so we understand fully what the fiscal impact might be.
Thank you, Attorney Rifkin. So I want to read Majority Leader Clark's resolution, and I think Attorney Rifkin, and I think there needs to be, at least for me, some discernment in the language on this resolution. It was voted on unanimously on June 22nd of last year. So this was actually 3 days after Juneteenth. So Majority Leader's resolve clause reads, the city of Hartford officially proclaim and recognize Juneteenth as a local holiday and will encourage all Hartford residents, government officials, businesses, and schools to educate and reflect on the historical and cultural significance the day has in our country's journey to freedom for the African American community. And be it further, the city of Hartford shall proclaim and recognize June 19th of each year as Juneteenth, Freedom, Independence, Emancipation Day in the city of Hartford. So does that change anything, Attorney Rifkin, or does that kind of leave us in the same, or maybe Majority Leader, was your intent on that this being implemented for this June? I don't know, whoever wants to answer that.
I'll go through you. So it is the intent is multifold for the city to recognize Juneteenth as a holiday. How the city has to do that is implemented by the mayor approaching the unions through the collective bargaining process. You know, we as council members can introduce a resolution for the city to recognize a special day, which we have done in the past. However, that's only good as what that resolution states. My desire is for this to be implemented as a paid city holiday, but with the understanding of what we just outlined during this dialogue. And so, which I'm glad Corporation Council is here because they have eloquently stated that there's a fiscal impact that will be that the city will experience. And so I think what we should do is have the analysis before we proceed forward, have that fiscal study done by the Office of Management and Grants and Budget, and then continue the conversation. And also too, let's remember that the chief elected official is the chief negotiator, and so allow him to go to the respective members of the unions to have these conversations. And also too, we have to understand, because there's always a caveat when you negotiate. So if he goes to say, hey, I would like to institute Juneteenth as an additional paid city holiday, there's always that chance that they can say, okay, well, we want you to consider X, Y, and Z. And so then now he's in a position as to trying to outweigh what's the more priority based upon the list of their demands versus the list of, maybe there's one item on his list that he would like to. So I think all in all, with all that said, let's start with the fiscal analysis request, table this discussion until this fiscal analysis comes back, and then also to have the conversation with the mayor and then tee it off to him to take it and then see where the discussions go from there.
Thank you, Majority Leader. So I just wanted to ask these are questions from the public. And so the first thing is how many unions are we negotiating with? How many unions are we talking about? I know we said that there's 4 left and we could come in, but how many are there total?
Seven bargaining units, and then we have the additional employee cohort that is non-union.
Okay.
So
got it.
You might want to think about it in terms of 8 different.
8, right. Okay. All right. And so then the next question, I know this is an ambitious question, and I know, when we talk about systems, practices, and policies, I know it's hard, right? But just for the public, in that most ideal setting, right? Let's say on the back end, we understand whether it be Lincoln's Day, that it's a fold, or giving up a 96, as Councilman Sanchez says, that piece is done. ideally, what is the timeline, an ideal timeline, an ambitious, idealistic timeline where we can actually see this implemented? Is it feasible for this year, or are we talking 2022, 2023? What is the timeline? I think some of the viewing audience would like to know, and I don't know who wants to answer that.
Attorney Lombardi, would you like to?
Sure. I don't, and I do not have a crystal ball, so this is just a guess that I hope no one will hold me to. If I was a betting woman, which I am not, my bet would be that if we were just adding a holiday and not asking to take any away, those conversations are going to go a lot faster, and we could probably get a Juneteenth as a paid city holiday this June.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, once we're talking about, oh, everyone stopped for a second. Sorry if I skipped.
Yeah.
Once we're talking about, you know, switching holidays, which one are we going to take away? That would be a longer conversation. And my recommendation would be that we do for Juneteenth what we have done in those couple of bargaining units where we got language around consolidation of the President's Day, which is to say, the union agrees that Juneteenth will be a paid city holiday, provided that the rest of the bargaining units agree as well. And this goes to the prudence of not having some people have different holiday schedule than others and the administrative nightmare that could result.
Thank you.
And let me just, Chair, just add one thing.
Sure.
The other thing to keep in mind is we would also need to amend our current ordinance so that if all of this was approved by each of the collective bargaining units, we would have alignment between those employees represented in the collective bargaining process and employees who are not. So it would be implemented all at one time, citywide for all. So just to bear that in mind as well, there would need to be the thinking about process you'd have to go through to get an ordinance approved.
Thank you, Attorney Riffin. I think that's a good point. Always good points from you, sir. So with that being said, I don't see any other hands up. And so I'll take a motion, or Councilman Gale, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that we simply postpone this matter to the next meeting of this committee. And included in that motion will be a request to administration, specifically to the our budget director, if that's the appropriate person, that we receive a budget analysis on the two scenarios of what the net expense to the city would be for either eliminating Lincoln's birthday and adding Juneteenth, or eliminating Lincoln's birthday or some other holiday and adding Juneteenth, or simply adding a 13th holiday. So that's the motion I would make.
Do I have a second? There was a lot on that. I don't know if we need to condense it. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Up for discussion. Any discussion? So I would just like to add for discussion, because I think oftentimes when communities hear this thing and they hear the word postpone, I think it's important. And what I want to tell the viewing audience is this, is that we're not walking away from this, right? Like, what we're doing is continuing to keep this on the front burner, so that way we can be very transparent in this process and understanding the importance of the process. Oftentimes, postponement is viewed as if it's being sent to, quote unquote, be buried. And that's not the case here. I just want to make sure that we all do that. So, all right, so we have a motion and it's been seconded. Any discussion besides my own? All in favor, say aye. I think it's only 2 committee members here. So if other council colleagues want to say aye, it's fine with me too. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so moved. So we'll be sending this, well, postponing it on the 2 items based upon the fiscal analysis and the second piece that Councilman Gill so eloquently stated. So with that being said, any other business? We have a whole bunch of movers and shakers from the city here. Anybody has any other business? No, seeing none. Motion to adjourn? Yes, Councilman Gill.
Before I make the motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair, I would just love for this committee to continue its discussion with recreation. And actually, maybe that's in another committee. I get my committees confused. So, but with budget coming up, it wouldn't hurt for there to be an expression from council as to what our priorities might be with respect to recreation. So just throw that out there and move to adjourn.
Okay, thank you for duly noted. So, all right, motion to adjourn. All right. Everyone have a wonderful Wednesday evening. Have a great evening. Thank you for joining us tonight.